Okay, I'm Andy Revkin at the Earth Institute at Columbia University, which is going through a transition to becoming the Columbia Climate School, which is an appropriate initiative given the conversation today. This is a side event to the U.S. Leadership Climate Action Week around the first summit leading to Glasgow and more this fall. This is a very momentous year, as every year is now, on climate and biodiversity. There's a lot of work to be done, and it has to be done in landscapes far and wide, from the Africa to Central America, Latin America, South America, through Asia. What you're going to hear from today you'll be hearing from an alliance representing forest peoples in 18 countries, representing 400 million hectares. That's about 2 Indias worth of land around the world that has been deemed threatened with biodiversity loss. And if those forests fall, then that's an additional contribution to global warming. And the trees, of course, can capture CO2, carbon dioxide, the main gas driving global warming. So these community representatives today from Central America, Indonesia may not be here today. The Republic of Congo will be focused on the concept of community-based solutions. We've heard a lot these days about nature-based solutions, but what has not been clear in those discussions so far, it's becoming clearer because of a new report, is that most of the quote-unquote natural landscapes we think of when we think of the forests, the great forests of the world, are inhabited. And there actually was a paper that just came out this week showing that people have shaped most of terrestrial nature for 12,000 years. Since the end of the last ice age, local and indigenous communities have been tending landscapes and drawing from nature, and the wonderful biodiversity that we see in the Amazon and the Congo and other regions like that is a function of an inhabited, a pristine system.
É uma função do sistema.
The Food and Agriculture
En el
Organization,
nuevo informe de FILAC,
of indigenous peoples of Latin America and the Caribbean. This report, called Forest Governance by Indigenous and Tribal Peoples, has been covered in the New York Times and elsewhere, and it demonstrates that people are a critical part of what happens to these forests and other terrestrial environments that we care about now on a global scale. Today, you'll hear from several representatives from this alliance of indigenous and local communities as they discuss that report and its findings, and then we talk about it specifically in the context of climate change. First, you'll hear from Tuntiak Katan, who's the general coordinator of the Global Alliance of Territorial Communities and vice coordinator of the Coordination of Indigenous Organizations from the Amazon Basin, best known as COICA, and from Ecuador. So Tuntiak Katan, good morning to you. Buenos dias.
Buenos días, hermanos y hermanas, quienes escuchan a través de este medio. Somos la Alianza Global de Comunidades Territoriales, constituidos en organizaciones más indígenas, organizaciones indígenas y comunidades locales más grandes del planeta que contienen bosques tropicales en el mundo. Somos APIP, la coordinadora de las organizaciones, la articulación de pueblos indígenas de Brasil, la coordinadora de las organizaciones indígenas de la cuenca amazónica, COICA. Somos Alianza Mesoamericana de Pueblos y Bosques, AMPB, y la Alianza de Pueblos Indígenas de Indonesia. Por supuesto, nuestros hermanos de la Cuenca del Congo, constituidos como organización REPALEC. Somos organizaciones que representan a pueblos indígenas y comunidades locales con territorio y bosques tropicales remanentes en el mundo. Saludos a lideresas, a líderes, a quienes todos nos escuchan, a jóvenes, mujeres, indígenas, no indígenas. Lo que quiero hacer hincapié como Alianza Global de Comunidades Territoriales es que todos juntos tenemos en nuestros territorios más de 400 millones de hectáreas en el planeta, más de 400 millones de hectáreas de bosques, de territorios en el planeta. Pero estos territorios, si vemos en algunos mapas de publicaciones, todavía un porcentaje muy importante no está reconocido legalmente. Alrededor de un poquito más de 50% son reconocidos legalmente y diría unos 48% sin reconocer legalmente. Entonces estamos en 18 países de estas, digamos, 5 organizaciones más grandes del planeta. Y todos juntos, las 5 organizaciones entre pueblos indígenas de Asia, de África, de Latinoamérica y comunidades locales, entre territorios legalmente reconocidos y no reconocidos, estamos gobernando más de 840 millones de hectáreas. Imaginémonos cuántos de toneladas de carbono, cuánta biodiversidad, cuánta cultura, cuánta sabiduría están albergados en esos territorios, que son muy importantes para la mitigación, para la adaptación, para contribuir a la reducción de emisiones, para secuestro de carbono que está contaminando el planeta. Entonces, hoy día, líderes y lideresas de esos lugares, de esos territorios, nos van a presentar, nos van a mencionar desde su realidad, desde su contexto cultural, territorial y desde las afectaciones a los derechos que están ocurriendo en cada uno de los territorios. Así que bienvenidos, bienvenidas a todos ustedes. Buenos días.
Gracias. Thanks for being here too, Tuntiak Katan. Now, buenos dias, David Kamowitz from Nicaragua, I believe, unless you're on the road. David was an author of this important report from the Food and Agriculture Organization, Forest Governance by Indigenous and Tribal Peoples. And David, could you give us a quick sense of the key findings in the report?
Yeah, the real actors, of course, are the organizations that are represented here today. But our role as FAO and as the United Nations was to see what did the research say in relation to what the indigenous organizations have said. And we look particularly at Latin America. And the first thing they told us was that these indigenous territories, as I like to say, are too big to fail. That the amount of carbon, that the amount of rain that's related to the hydrological cycles in these forests, that the amount of biodiversity that they hold is so large that if the world does not support these indigenous and Afro-descendant territories, it's going to be a huge problem, not only for them, but for all of us. That we're talking about 14% of all of the carbon in all of the trees in all of the tropics of the planet is in these territories just in Latin America, not even including Africa, Indonesia, these other places. We're talking about territories that are larger than a large part of Western Europe, that are 3 times the size of all of Bolivia. So these are very large. That was our first conclusion, that this is a major part of the landscape, that this is 1/3 of all of the forests in Latin America. So they're too big to fail. We can't let them fail. Our second conclusion was that, yes, the indigenous peoples are right when they say that they are the guardians of the forest. That there are studies from almost every single Latin American country, and in most cases, multiple studies that show that the forests in indigenous territories and Afro-descendant territories are much better conserved and taken care of than other forests outside those territories. And that's even true when you consider things like soil fertility or how close they are to roads or other reasons that people often come up with to say, oh yes, their forests are better conserved, but. Well, even if you take out a lot of those buts, the indigenous forests are still better conserved. And they're in part conserved because of the governance and the way they manage their forests. They're in part conserved because of cultural aspects of indigenous and territorial cultures. And they're also in part conserved because Latin American governments have had progressive policies, surprisingly, compared to Africa and Asia with regard to these forests that have helped to protect them. The third thing that we found was that even though the indigenous peoples are the guardians of the forests and these Afro-descendant communities, which are called tribal peoples in the report because they're not all Afro-descendant communities, it's a certain subgroup of the Afro-descendant communities. Even though they are the guardians of the forest and their forests are better preserved, we cannot assume that those forests will continue to be preserved in the future. The threats are growing very rapidly, the risks are very high. Mining, logging, expansion of ranching, palm oil, coca production, land speculation is all increasingly threatening these territories, as is accidental fires and climate change itself. Then finally, we found that there's very strong evidence about what works and what could be done to support these indigenous communities, Afro-descendant communities who are managing their territories. First, we need to strengthen their territorial rights. That means titling, but it also means enforcing and supporting the titles that already exist to stop illegal land invasion. It means no longer continuing to give oil concessions and forest concessions on lands without people's free, prior, and informed consent. The second thing is the need for payments for environmental services and compensating these communities. Not the way we have payments for environmental services for individual landholders, which is to pay them not to destroy their forest, but payments that give the communities the resources that they need as communities, as collective groups, to stop the different external actors that are trying to invade and threaten their forests. The third thing we need is to have community forestry support from governments, regulatory systems that take into account indigenous forms of managing the forests, that are supportive of agroforestry and indigenous. And there we get to the next point, the fourth point being support for indigenous cultures and for traditional knowledge. We found that, in fact, there is hard evidence that shows where indigenous cultures are more intact, where traditional knowledge is better preserved and is more integrated into the process. In fact, these forests are better conserved. And finally, we need more support for organizations like the ones we have today. Indigenous organizations, tribal organizations, and particularly women and youth within them. And just to say it, they're going to tell you from their life experience. All I can say is that there's 300 scientific reports that back up what they're saying. Thank you.
Could Gracias. That's so important. And I am going to just go back to the fact that there's yet another paper, a brand new one, which is too new for you to cite, which makes this point even more powerfully. And this is the paper, people have shaped most of terrestrial nature for 12,000 years in these regions particularly. And one of the authors put this vividly, Yadvinder Malhi, he said, hold on, I just had this queued up. High biodiversity is compatible with, and in some cases, a result of people living in these landscapes, working with local and traditional communities and learning from them is essential if we're to try to protect biodiversity, and I would add climate. So this is a very robust body of science. And I think it's important that people understand it's not one study, right? As you said, you had looked at hundreds even, and now even today, this week, there's more work. So now, thank you, David. We were going to go to Indonesia, and our Indonesian representative couldn't attend for complicated reasons. So David, could you just maybe briefly talk about the Indonesian context? I know you've dug in on that too before we go into the next panelist.
Yeah, the Indonesian context is an extreme case in the opposite direction. Indigenous peoples in Indonesia have been occupying, some estimates are around 40 million hectares of land. And the government has failed to recognize almost any of that, unlike the Latin American countries, which have recognized a significant amount. The indigenous peoples have already mapped and demarcated something around, I believe it's 10 or 12 million hectares, but the government programs in general have not been supportive, even though the Jokowi government has said that it will support social forestry, and even though the Indonesian Supreme Court has recognized the traditional ancestral rights over these territorial lands. The result has been very rapid destruction of the Indonesian forests. And most of the forests that are remaining that are not destroyed, many of them are the forests that have in fact been managed by indigenous groups and have in one way or another been able to keep the threats under control up until now. And the most important case of that remaining today is in West Papua, the Indonesian part of Papua Island. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, it's a tough situation there. Lots of work to be done. So now we'll hear from Levi Sucre. I think you're here. Let me just, sorry, I had your bio.
Hola.
Coordinator for the Mesoamerican Alliance of Peoples and Forests, AMPB, Costa Rica. Welcome to you. It's good to see you again. I think we were on an earlier broadcast a couple of months ago. Over to Levi.
Gracias, Andrew. Es un gusto estar y compartir con ustedes. Primeramente, quiero agradecer a FAO y FIDAC por recoger evidencia de la voz de los pueblos indígenas que hemos intentado desde hace muchos años que los gobiernos y tomadores de decisiones en temas climáticos escuchen y reconozcan. Es mi primer agradecimiento por recoger nuestras voces en este estudio. Segundo, nuestra expectativa es que un estudio como este proyecte nuestra voz de clamor, de propuesta para un planeta mejor para toda la humanidad. Nuestra esperanza es que los políticos y los gobiernos de los países reconozcan que todos los grupos humanos somos importantes para mantener una vida en equilibrio en el planeta. Y hoy los estudios, y este estudio en específico, ha demostrado que el papel que jugamos los pueblos indígenas en el mundo es crucial para poder seguir manteniendo este equilibrio que tanto necesitamos la humanidad para poder sobrevivir. Pero ese estudio, más allá del reconocimiento, necesita acciones concretas. Acciones concretas en el respeto por los derechos de nuestros pueblos, como la seguridad jurídica de las tierras. Ya lo decía David en el caso de Indonesia, no podemos seguir con nuestra sangre defendiendo los bosques sin tener las herramientas jurídicas para defenderlos por nosotros, por nuestras generaciones, por nuestra cultura y por la humanidad. El derecho a la participación en las políticas de desarrollo de los países. Somos actores claves en conservar el planeta, en mantener el equilibrio, pues así deberemos ser actores claves en definir qué es el desarrollo que queremos en los países y sobre todo, cuál es el desarrollo que queremos para nuestros pueblos, para seguir conservando y protegiendo esta acción cultural, cosmogónica, ancestral de convivencia armónica con los recursos naturales y los bosques. Tenemos y queremos que se reconozcan el conocimiento que hay en los pueblos indígenas sobre cómo se convive y cómo se vive feliz, cómo se hace un buen vivir en este planeta sin destruir el hábitat que todos necesitamos para vivir. Tema que las políticas neoliberales de capitalismo parecen olvidar, de que no podemos existir como seres humanos sin un planeta que nos alberga y nos da gratuitamente tanto elemento de vivencia para sobrevivir como el oxígeno, la biodiversidad, que nos hace una vida más, es que nos permite pues vivir en este planeta. Eso también pasa por justicia en la distribución de los recursos. Tanta dinero que se habla para proteger el planeta en grandes eventos, como el que está pasando en este momento en Estados Unidos por Biden. ¿Cuántos millones no se van a decir que van a poner para proteger a los recursos naturales o para mantener el equilibrio en el planeta sobre el cambio climático? Pero, ¿qué se ve o qué se orienta hacia los pueblos indígenas y comunidades que más bien estamos en una lucha constante contra estos mismos que están dando dinero? Entonces, esa justicia de distribución de fondos es una de las demandas de nuestros pueblos para que se reconozca el papel que hoy se ha evidenciado cada vez más a través de estudios. Nosotros queremos seguir manteniendo nuestros sistemas de buen vivir, un sistema que nos abastece de recursos naturales, que nos garantiza soberanía alimentaria, que nos conecta incluso con la economía de nuestros países de una forma sostenible. Nosotros queremos seguir viviendo de esa forma, seguir positivo. El tema del cambio climático es un asunto de la humanidad, es un asunto del que está en el campo, del que está en la ciudad y donde usted necesita de los recursos naturales para sobrevivir. Entonces, muchas gracias y quisiera dejar este mensaje por los pueblos indígenas de Mesoamérica, por Coica, los de la Amazonía, por Brasil, por Indonesia, que pasamos día a día en una lucha por defender nuestros recursos, aún con nuestra sangre. Muchas gracias.
And thank you for being here. Very valuable perspective. Now we go to Brazil. Sonia Guajajara, who is an indigenous leader from Brazil. She's the executive coordinator of the Association of Indigenous Peoples of Brazil, APAIB. She's from the Guajajara Trihar people, live in the forests of the Arari-Boia indigenous land in Brazil. She has a background in nursing and in special education and in leadership, most importantly. Her indigenous and environmental activism began as a youth, and she has come through made extraordinary progress in Brazil as a voice for the rights of the peoples of the forest. Sonia Guajajara, bom dia.
Olá, bom dia a todos. Bom, muito obrigada pelo espaço para estarmos aqui nesse importante webinar e saudar também todas as pessoas que estão nos acompanhando aí nas redes. Bom, eu falo aqui como uma moradora da floresta amazônica. e com muita preocupação com a crescente destruição que a Amazônia vem sofrendo. Aqui no Brasil, nós temos o direito territorial reconhecido pela Constituição Federal, que é a lei máxima do país. Porém, todos esses territórios, né, embora temos esse direito reconhecido, né, os que estão regularizados têm um processo violento de invasão.
People who are recognized, they are often threatened.
Um passivo, né, muito grande de territórios a serem regularizados.
Nous avons encore beaucoup de territoires qui doivent encore être reconnus.
Política de não reconhecer, de não regularizar os territórios indígenas. E por isso nós continuamos em luta pela demarcação dos nossos territórios. Estudos e pesquisas científicas têm mostrado todos os dias que nós, povos indígenas, né, somos os melhores guardiões, que nós protegemos os nossos territórios com o nosso modo de vida. Portanto, é preciso que os modos de vida, a cultura de nossos povos sejam respeitados. Nós estamos vivendo hoje uma das piores crises sanitária e ambiental desde a Segunda Guerra Mundial. Estamos com a pandemia do novo coronavírus e na luta para que haja disponibilização de vacina para todas as pessoas, indígenas, não indígenas, né, para que a gente possa conter essa pandemia. Para conter a pandemia, acabar com o novo coronavírus, tem a vacina. Mas para conter as mudanças climáticas, o que é preciso fazer? Para conter as mudanças climáticas, o princípio ativo é a consciência dos humanos. E como nós vamos resgatar essa conexão da humanidade com a Mãe Terra? Isso é uma emergência. Não somos somente nós da Amazônia, né, dos outros biomas, que precisamos da Mãe Terra. Aqui nós apenas coabitamos, com cuidado, com responsabilidade, mas o mundo inteiro precisa entender que as nossas ações definem o nosso futuro. Ou nós cuidamos agora, ou não existirá planeta para mais ninguém. Então, nós estamos aqui nessa luta, nessa articulação internacional, porque nós entendemos que é importante esse apoio internacional para ajudar nessa pressão para que o governo brasileiro apoie a demarcação dos territórios indígenas, a proteção ambiental. Não vai adiantar firmar acordo com os Estados Unidos em nome da proteção das florestas se não houver um diálogo, uma consulta com os povos originários, povos indígenas, povos comunidades tradicionais. Nós cuidamos há milhares de anos e comparar os territórios indígenas com demais terras públicas, nós somos as terras mais preservadas, mesmo sem uma política pública efetiva de proteção. Portanto, é importante falar, é importante gritar, é importante fazer chamado para o mundo que, como já diz bem a Coica, né? A Amazônia viva, a humanidade segura. Reafirmamos esse convite, né, e esse chamado para toda a humanidade. Muito obrigada.
Hey, thank you to Obrigada. Obrigado. Obrigada. That was a very valuable comment, especially the recognition of the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the keepers of the forest, the guardians. a well-kept forest does not produce these kinds of novel pathogens. We are in a world now of disruption. And so here is a virus that is now a particular threat to the very peoples who are conserving the nature from which such pathogens can emerge without care. So that was very valuable observation. And now we'll move back to Tuntiak Katan again. Tuntiak from Ecuadorian part of the Amazon. It would be great if you can comment on the findings in the report. And soon after we hear from Congo and a couple more observations, we'll then move to the climate context more specifically. So Tuntiak Katan, over to you again. Thank you. Gracias.
Sí, efectivamente, las observaciones que quería dar y hacer énfasis es mi presentación que hice sobre la distribución de las 5 organizaciones indígenas y comunidades locales más grandes del planeta. Es que, si bien es cierto, en algunas organizaciones tenemos mayor reconocimiento de territorios legalmente, pero aún sigue faltando un gran porcentaje, como casi 50% de reconocimiento de territorios indígenas de posesión ancestral. Pero esta situación se acentúa más en la región de Asia y África, en Cuenca del Congo. Allá casi no hay reconocimiento legal oficial de territorios indígenas y comunidades locales. Si vemos en el mapa de África y de Indonesia, podemos ver alrededor de 80% o quizás más que aún falta el reconocer los territorios indígenas. Finalmente, con esto quiero decir que pueblos indígenas, con reconocimiento o sin reconocimiento, siguen protegiendo y siguen contribuyendo al planeta con secuestro de carbono, con reducción de emisiones. Y quiero decir a los países de la Amazonía, de Asia, de África y de todo el mundo, que en sus informes anuales o para acceder a fondos climáticos globales, están contabilizando los territorios y los bosques de pueblos indígenas y comunidades locales que están defendiendo con su vida, y ponen en sus informes en las contribuciones nacionales determinadas como que fueran sus políticas ambientales y propias. Más bien, son políticas de pueblos indígenas que defienden con su vida, y las Naciones Unidas y los países tienen que reconocer esta contribución de pueblos indígenas de una vez, porque los científicos, los artículos científicos ya lo están diciendo. Solamente falta incluir en política pública a nivel nacional. Muchas gracias.
And thank you. Gracias. Again, very valuable points you're making here. We have Diel Mochire from Congo on. I want to check to see if he has a good connection. I think there was some problem. If not, we can go back to him and talk with Andrea Carmen. So Diel, if you can let us know how you're doing there. Can we hear from you? If you can hear us. If he's having trouble, why don't we circle back to the Congo perspective and move to Andrea? I'm sure we'll get him on through another means shortly. Andrea Carmen, co-chair of the Facilitative Working Group for the Framework Convention on Climate Change, Local Communities and Indigenous Peoples Platform. It's a long name, but a very important perspective and organization. No, it's really important that the Framework Convention, the treaty that I started writing about back in the 30 years ago, is now recognizing increasingly the voice of indigenous peoples. And thank you for being here.
Respectful greetings, morning, evening, wherever you may be, to my relatives. And thank you very much to my colleagues from Kawika for inviting me to participate. Of course, we work very closely on the issue of addressing Indigenous people's rights and knowledge in the context of climate change at the UNFCCC. And again, as Andrew mentioned, forgive me for these long names, or the alternative is to use these acronyms that nobody understands. We say Local Communities, Indigenous Peoples Platform is called the LCIP, right? in UNEs, as we say. But it's really important to recognize through the hard-fought efforts of Indigenous peoples, just like the 30 years that we took to work to bring about the adoption of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, it was also many, many years of work by Indigenous peoples in the context of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC, that we were even able to gain access to being in the room. In Paris, during the negotiations for the famous Paris Agreement, Indigenous peoples, unless we were credentialed by a state, which is out of access for many Indigenous peoples and others, would not want to do that. We want our own voice in these bodies. We were not even allowed into the negotiation rooms. So I won't go into all of the efforts and activism and advocacy that we did in Paris in 2015 to have Indigenous peoples' rights be recognized in the preamble for the first time in a legally binding environmental convention, but also to bring about paragraph 135, which specifically recognized the need to strengthen Indigenous peoples and local communities' efforts, technologies, and practices, which can only happen in our own homelands, in our own communities, but also to create a platform for exchange of knowledge based on the context of Indigenous peoples' rights, including free, prior, and informed consent. So the platform was, as they say, operationalized in December 2018 at COP24 in Katowice, Poland, with the creation of the facilitative working group, which gives us direct access to a UN body for the first time in our more than 40 years at the United Nations. Indigenous peoples from the 7 regions selected the representatives. So I was humbled to be selected by the North America Indigenous peoples directly, not through a UN body, but directly. Just to comment on the issues that we're talking about, sometimes we are faced with terminologies and imposition of frameworks that don't relate or come from Indigenous peoples, and the concept of nature-based solutions is not one that we have addressed at all, because that is something that somebody came up with, just like concepts like green economy, blue economy, that we've had to challenge, because of course all solutions are nature-based and all humans are part of nature. And this concept of separating the human family from nature is the cause of the problem. It's not the solution to the problem. So I strongly support the discussion here. That's what we're focusing on there at the United Nations as Indigenous peoples. But the most important discussions are on our homelands, and we require a rights-based approach, recognizing our lands, territories, traditional seeds, cultural heritage, as well as recognition with respect for our knowledge systems, our food systems, our land tenure systems as essential for addressing climate change from the point of view of Indigenous peoples, rather than these false solutions. We find that in the climate change concept, the concept of nature-based solutions and many times is used to justify what many of us consider false solutions like carbon trading, forest offsets. There may be some value for some indigenous peoples in forest areas, but it's not a solution to climate change and creates many human rights violations as well, especially for indigenous peoples in areas like Canada, where the tar sands are being developed, and trading for preserving forests somewhere else doesn't mitigate climate change. So I just want to salute you and thank you for inviting me to this discussion. And we need to work more closely together because our task is to ensure that the voices of indigenous peoples in our territories, in our grassroots communities are heard by the international community and that our rights are respected in this regard. Chokwe Utesia. Thank you. That means in Yaqui. I'm from the Yaqui Indigenous Nation, by the way. I'm a desert community. We do have a forest. It's a mesquite forest. And my homelands are divided between southern Arizona, United States, and Sonora, Mexico, by that infamous border between the United States and Mexico. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrea. Yes, we all live on two maps at the same time. The modern map of territories and boundaries and the indigenous map. I highly recommend that anyone out there goes to the website native-land.ca. It's a Canadian website. It's Google Maps for Indigenous history. It's a fantastic resource. And I
also forgot to mention I'm the executive director of the International Indian Treaty Council. I should say that as well. My day job. Thank you, Chokwe.
Thank you. We're going to try to go to DL from Congo and see how the connection is. DL, bonjour. Bonsoir. Can you hear me? And maybe DL, just speak a little bit. If
oui,
you can.
Bonjour. Oui, je peux parler un peu. Je ne sais pas si les participants m'attendent aussi.
Fantastic. Yes, we hear you. That's great.
Oui, allô?
Oui. C'est bien.
OK. Pour ceux qui ne me connaissent pas, je suis M. Thiel Chiré Mwenge. Je suis du REPALEAC, c'est le réseau des populations autochtones et locales pour la gestion durable des écosystèmes forestiers en Afrique centrale. Et on travaille dans au moins 8 pays, notamment la RDC, où je suis maintenant. Je suis de la République démocratique du Congo, le Tchad, le Burundi, le Rwanda, la République centrafricaine, le Gabon et le Cameroun. C'est juste une désolation pour ces pays parce que nous venons de perdre le président du Tchad et mes frères autochtones maintenant là sont alliés. Je suis totalement désolé de tout ça. Mais cela ne pourrait pas empêcher quand même que je puisse partager notre avis en tant que REPALEAC par rapport au processus. Et en tant que REPALEAC, nous avons tout un cadre stratégique avec une théorie de changement qui met en relief les savoirs endogènes, les pratiques traditionnelles pour essayer de mitiger et développer des résiliences vis-à-vis de tout ce qui est changement climatique. Et à travers la sous-région Afrique centrale, à travers les REPALEAC, les membres sont organisés et structurés dans chaque pays à travers les coordinations nationales. Et des activités de mobilisation des communautés, des plaidoyers auprès des États sont en exergue. Et cela, on tient en place les aspects liés à la conservation pour essayer de mettre en avant-plan tous les systèmes, la conservation de l'écosystème en utilisant les savoirs endogènes, les savoirs traditionnels. en mettant en avant-plan les systèmes rituels à travers les sites sacrés, les sites traditionnels. On met en place notre programme de sécurisation des terres, mais aussi basé sur les droits des communautés, que ce soit dans l'approche APAC qui est développée par les peuples autochtones et les communautés locales, mais aussi que ce soit dans l'approche air protégée développée par le gouvernement congolais. Et des dialogues sont rassemblés, sont mis en place entre les différentes parties prenantes pour avoir une conscience commune de nous permettre de mettre en place les stratégies de lutter contre les changements climatiques. Nous sommes très rassurés que les solutions ne peuvent pas venir d'ailleurs, parce que les solutions pour les changements climatiques, c'est la nature elle-même. Ce ne sont pas des solutions magiques, ce ne sont pas des solutions extra, mais tout en valorisant tout ce que nous avons comme compétences, tout en ayant conscience de ces fléaux, que si la déforestation est mise au centre de l'économie, ça contribuera beaucoup plus davantage à tout ce qui est accroissement de la carbonisation, à l'accroissement des effets du changement climatique. Et le REPALEAC, dans sa stratégie, à travers ces 4 axes d'intervention, met en place l'homme au centre de la solution contre le changement climatique. Parce que les moteurs, tous ceux qui sont développés, c'est l'homme qui en développe, et tout cela en mettant de côté tout ce qui est modernisme. Donc, on doit se focaliser sur les systèmes empiriques, sur les systèmes endogènes, sur les systèmes traditionnels pour essayer de booster les défis liés au changement climatique. Dans la stratégie du REPALEAC, la reforestation, oui, mais la conservation des forêts intactes, c'est une des stratégies les plus globales pour arriver à conserver la biodiversité dans des zones où la biodiversité est habituée, et ne pas aller à la création des forêts debout par la plantation de nouvelles espèces d'arbres qui ne donnent pas normalement le sens écologique au bon sens, conformément au mode de sécurisation autochtone. Un autre aspect par rapport à l'expérience de la République démocratique du Congo, c'est la conservation communautaire par l'approche foresterie communautaire. Et là, les communautés essayent, conformément à l'article 22 du Code forestier, demandent au gouvernement, tel est le cas du Cameroun, le cas du Congo-Brazzaville et le cas de la République démocratique du Congo, l'État octroie des titres aux communautés pour conserver leurs espaces acquis en vertu de la coutume. Et dans ces zones-là, occupées par les peuples autochtones et qui sont encore reconnus comme très riches en biodiversité, témoignent qu'en réalité, les peuples autochtones, sans les peuples autochtones, le monde serait en disparition, étant donné que la manière de la gouvernance locale, la manière de la gestion locale a un plus-value à la conservation et réduit les impacts du changement climatique. Voilà un peu en synthèse ce que je pourrais donner en termes d'expérience. Et cela a motivé même la République démocratique du Congo d'adopter une loi pour sécuriser les droits des fonciers des peuples autochtones, les reconnaître les modes de conservation qui leur appartiennent, en vue de lutter, mettre au profit leurs capacités traditionnelles de bien gérer, de bien conserver, de bien gouverner la biodiversité, l'écosystème et la forêt. Et c'est là, dans l'objectif d'atteindre la réduction des effets liés au changement climatique. Voilà un peu ce que je pourrais partager avec l'ensemble des participants. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup, Diel. Very valuable perspective. So here we have a few minutes, 10 minutes or so. We've heard voices from around the planet's tropics today, reinforcing what science has revealed using data. You can't have nature-based climate solutions without supporting the community-based solutions undertaken by the peoples living in the world's forests in a good and healthy relationship with those ecosystems. We're going to spend the last few minutes here with a final round of comments from the community representatives on how this all relates to climate. We've focused in a general sense on the value of community managed and traditionally managed lands, and now just a little bit more on the climate context, because this week on Thursday and Friday, the 22nd, 23rd, the US Leaders Summit is underway and leading to COP26, which will be partially online, partially in Scotland late in the year. So for this final bit of discussion, we go back to, excuse me, my notes got tangled here. Back to Sonia, sorry, Guajajara. Sonia, a final thought on the climate context of these discussions today and the reports about the value of indigenous communities as guardians. Any final thoughts from you on that?
Eu só queria comentar que é muito comum escutar as pessoas falarem, inclusive as pessoas que estão próximas de nós, da importância das soluções baseadas na natureza, como é o próprio nome deste nosso webinar, né? E sempre esquece de falar das pessoas, sempre esquece de falar da importância das culturas. A Amazônia, toda a Amazônia, né, ela é rica de uma biodiversidade incrível, mas essa biodiversidade não existe só porque é a Amazônia. Ela existe por conta do modo de vida dos povos indígenas que, há milênios de anos, transitavam por todas as partes, levando essa diversidade de sementes para todos os lugares. Então, essa biodiversidade se deve ao modo de vida, né, coletivo de nossos povos. Então, não há como dissociar, separar, né, proteção ambiental, né, dos direitos das pessoas. Então, é muito importante se pensar em soluções baseadas na natureza e também dos povos indígenas, comunidades tradicionais, ribeirinhos, quilombolas, né? Então, para nós, como já dizia a Marcha das Mulheres Indígenas aqui no Brasil, que aconteceu em 2019, território, nosso corpo, nosso espírito. O território é esse lugar que ancora o nosso corpo, o corpo é esse lugar que sustenta o nosso espírito. Então, é sempre reforçar essa ideia para todas as pessoas, não esquecer nunca de trazer sempre essa preocupação, né, em primeiro lugar das pessoas, porque é exatamente a ação das pessoas que vai garantir essa proteção ou a destruição. Então, para isso, nós precisamos dessa valorização das iniciativas feitas pelas comunidades a partir dos guardiões dos territórios. Esses guardiões que arriscam sua vida diariamente, muitas das vezes sem nenhum apoio, sem nenhuma condição para realizar esse importante trabalho para o mundo. Então, a valorização dos guardiões dos territórios, guardião da floresta, né? A valorização dos brigadistas indígenas que estão no território, apagando incêndios, apagando fogo, e é muito importante também que ele seja valorizado para fazer uma ação educativa, preventiva, né? Principalmente próximo das comunidades indígenas. E, para isso, é muito importante um processo de participação na governança pública. Todo e qualquer governo, né, precisa considerar e apoiar essa participação dos povos indígenas em todos os processos. Muito obrigada.
Muito obrigado. Thank you for all that you do and for your work in Amazonia. It's extremely important and to hear these voices. Part of my project at Columbia University is designed to amplify the voices of peoples who have been excluded from important conversations on policies that can drive progress on climate and biodiversity, but that have to start on the ground in places far from normal governance, from places that the voices you're hearing today are coming from. Levi Sucre, a little more from you, and I think we'll be close to the end here. And maybe if we can sneak in a little from Tuntiak at the end, that'd be great. But Levi, over to you. Gracias.
Gracias, Andrew. Efectivamente, yo creo que ya es el estudio, y todos sabemos el aporte de los pueblos indígenas en este tema de conservación de los bosques, pero falta profundizar en el cómo lo hacemos. ¿Cómo lo hacemos? Y ahí me llama mucho la atención de la cantidad de propuestas que hay a lo largo de todos estos grupos representados aquí en la Alianza Global Territorial Comunitaria. Yo hice una gira por Brasil y ver a las mujeres haciendo sus fondos de inversión territorial. Veo el fondo amazónico, veo tantas propuestas puestas en la mesa donde no hay excusas para decir, bueno, no podemos llegar a trabajar con los pueblos indígenas de la región. No hay forma, no hay cómo, sí hay cómo. Y para el caso de la Alianza Mesoamericana de Pueblos y Bosques, nosotros hemos instrumentalizado un mecanismo para inversión directa a las comunidades que ya llevamos más de 8 años poniéndolo en práctica, que es el Fondo Territorial Mesoamericano con inversión directa a los pueblos en una agenda territorial que incide en las políticas de los gobiernos. Y ya está este mecanismo funcionando. Y lo otro es que la Escuela de Liderazgo de la Alianza Mesoamericana de Pueblos y Bosques, que no solamente busca crear capacidades, sino horizontalizar el conocimiento entre pueblos, que podemos crecer juntos, porque hay muchas experiencias exitosas de manejo de bosques, de iniciativas turísticas, de producción tradicional, de conocimiento a lo largo de la región. Y nuestra escuela pues hace este trabajo de fortalecer este conocimiento y llevarlo de unos a otros. Entonces sí hay alternativas para esto. A mí me da mucho gusto siempre que hablo el tema de la pandemia. Yo puedo decir que las mujeres de los pueblos indígenas y las comunidades salvaron más vida que incluso los gobiernos en este tema de la pandemia en los pueblos indígenas y comunidades locales. Cuando ingresó la pandemia, la voz de la mujer lideró la defensa de los niños, de los adultos en las comunidades, porque nos encontramos desamparados. De pronto los gobiernos empezaron a girar políticas para las ciudades y los pueblos estábamos olvidados, y el papel y el rol de la mujer que jugó en este tema de combate y atención a la pandemia fue crucial. Y por eso también en la Alianza Mesoamericana tenemos toda una coordinación de mujeres a lo largo de Mesoamérica con iniciativas muy exitosas. Me llama muchísimo la atención que hay tanta experiencia, y yo sí creo que pues no hay excusa para los gobiernos. No hay excusa para decir no hay cómo apoyar estas iniciativas que salen como resultado de estos estudios. Sí hay iniciativas y creo que debemos seguirla impulsando. Gracias, Andrew.
Muchas gracias again. Thank you, Levi. And Tuntia Katan, you have the final word here. And I hope people will continue to focus on this issue. This is not, this is one conversation on the path to progress. Don't turn off this webcast and just go back to normal life. There's lots of work to be done. Tuntia Katan, thank you again.
Gracias. He escuchado atentamente a muchas personas sabias, hombres y mujeres que han intervenido en esta ocasión. Y queda claro que solamente hablar de soluciones basadas en la naturaleza es un componente, es una parte. Pero queda claro también que las comunidades indígenas, no indígenas, cuando hablo de comunidades, son un grupo de personas, pueden ser de la ciudad, de la comunidad de la selva, que son importantes para dar esas soluciones. Entonces, queda demostrado que esta aglomeración de pueblos indígenas y comunidades locales de la Alianza Global tienen la capacidad para retener la pérdida de biodiversidad, para combatir el cambio climático global, para asegurar la soberanía alimentaria y combatir la pandemia, esta pandemia y las otras pandemias que puedan surgir. Por lo tanto, reconocer sus territorios, sus derechos, sus contribuciones determinadas con sus territorios y bosques es importante. Pido a Naciones Unidas, a los gobiernos, a los cooperantes que sigan contribuyendo la lucha por la vida que estamos realizando los pueblos indígenas y comunidades locales en todo el planeta. Saludo a mis hermanos de África, a mis hermanos de Asia, de toda Mesoamérica y de la Amazonía y Brasil. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much.
And thank you so much for being part of this today. This has been an excellent discussion of key issues surrounding the importance of focusing on community-based solutions in regions of vast tropical forest biodiversity and climate value. Without supporting community-based solutions in these regions, you can forget about nature-based solutions. Nature and humanity in these areas has been connected for thousands of years and can be connected going forward for generations to come. I'm Andy Revkin from the Earth Institute in the Columbia Climate School at Columbia University. I was very happy to help moderate this discussion today with leaders and creative scientists from around the world focused on this important frontier in a very critical year with the Biden administration trying to forge progress on climate and everyone at the table in ways that wasn't clear before.